So, we're doing something a little different in this explainer today. We're going to take a really peaceful, almost meditative journey into one of the most profound chapters of the Quran. It's called Surah Al-Ma'idah, and that actually translates to the table spread. Now, instead of just looking at these verses as, ancient historical text, we're going to explore how they offer this incredibly timeless, highly practical framework for finding calm and purpose right now in our crazy daily lives. Whether you've known this chapter your whole life or you're hearing its wisdom literally for the very first time, there is just something so deeply grounding about its message. So let's just dive right into it. The verse says it guides them to the ways of peace, brings them out of darkness and into light, and guides them to the straight path. Through this amazing opening, Allah promises to guide anyone who seeks His pleasure straight to the ways of peace. Man, just let that phrase sit with you for a second. The ways of peace. In our hyper-connected and, let's be honest, often chaotic world, inner peace is basically the ultimate prize we're all desperately searching for, right? The verse beautifully describes this movement, like stepping out of the dark and right into the light. And looking at this from a traditional theological perspective, this isn't just talking about the afterlife. No, it's a very real, modern blueprint for finding daily inner peace. It's basically telling us that divine guidance is inherently designed from the ground up to bring absolute tranquility to our minds and total clarity to our paths. So, where does this peaceful journey actually begin? Well, let's look at section 1, fulfilling our sacred promises, understanding our spiritual and human bonds. Because really, all mindful devotion starts right here, with the promises we make. The very first verse of this chapter kicks off with a massive command. It says, "O believers, honor your obligations," or in the original Arabic, al-uqud. Now, a covenant isn't just some rigid, boring legal contract. In traditional Islamic theology, it's a sacred bond. It's the spiritual promise you make with the divine, absolutely, but equally, it is the practical, everyday ethical commitments you make to your family, your coworkers, your neighbors. Honoring your word is literally the bedrock of personal integrity. Think about it. When you actually keep your promises, you totally eliminate the anxiety of deceit or covering your tracks. You're just paving a straight, clear road right to that inner peace we were just talking about. And this brilliantly illustrates how those promises actually play out in real life. Verse 2 gives us this super clear duality. On one side, the call to cooperate with one another in goodness and righteousness. On the flip side, the strict boundary to not cooperate in sin and transgression. I mean, what a timeless formula for community unity, right? It just completely shifts our focus away from selfish ambition and points us directly toward shared purpose. Seriously, imagine if, in our daily lives, every single collaboration we entered was filtered through this one simple rule. It's a huge reminder that our own spiritual health is directly tied to how we help other people succeed in doing good things. Okay, to maintain this kind of high-level integrity, we really need moments to pause and refresh. So that brings us to section 2, purity and daily life, intentional living and spiritual resets. Verse 6 lays out the exact steps for wudu, which is the physical washing performed right before prayer. Wash your faces, wash hands to the elbows, wipe your heads, and wash feet to the ankles. Now, if you're a beginner, this might just look like a basic hygiene routine, but I promise you it is deeply, deeply spiritual. Think about your busy workday for a second. The endless emails, the stress, the constant, nonstop noise. Wudu is basically a built-in meditative reset button. The actual physical act of washing your face and hands using water, or even clean earth if water isn't around, it serves to physically wash away the mental clutter of the world. It prepares you to just stand before the divine with a completely clean slate. Now here is what's absolutely fascinating. Look at the profound empathy tucked right at the end of that exact same verse. It says, "It is not Allah's will to burden you, but to purify you and complete His favor upon you." When we start talking about rules and daily rituals, it's so easy to just feel overwhelmed, like it's another chore. But the source text is explicitly clear here. Divine guidance is meant to lift burdens off your shoulders, not stack more on top of them. The ultimate goal of all this purity is to complete a favor upon you, leaving you feeling calm, refreshed, and full of gratitude. And when we are purified internally like that, it totally changes how we interact with the world externally. Which leads us to section 3, justice and inner peace, finding harmony through fairness. The absolutely crucial point here is captured so beautifully in verse 8. Do not let the hatred of a people lead you to injustice. Be just. That is closer to righteousness. We're talking about radical fairness here. Look, it's easy to be just with people we actually like, right? But to be fair to someone who has completely wronged you, man, that requires immense spiritual discipline. When we hold on to grudges or we lash out unjustly because we're angry, we're really just poisoning our own hearts. By choosing fairness, even when it is incredibly difficult emotionally, we protect our own inner peace. Being just isn't just for society. It's an active, meditative approach to keeping your personal harmony intact, no matter what crazy external circumstances are happening around you. Let's just pause on this short, quiet statement from verse 7. Allah knows best what is hidden in the heart. You can perform all the outer rituals flawlessly. You can put on this grand public display of being super just and fair, but true mindful devotion, it's all about aligning what is hidden on the inside with what everyone else sees on the outside. When you're in your quiet reflections, this verse is essentially encouraging you to check your internal compass. Like, are your intentions actually pure? Are you really doing the right thing for the right reasons? Now, to truly appreciate the heavy weight of these spiritual teachings, we need to quickly ground them in their historical context. So let's look at Section 4, Timeless Historical Lessons, Wisdom from the Past for the Present. As noted in verse 3, this chapter actually contains a monumental historical milestone for those early believers. It reads, "Today I have perfected your faith for you, completed my favor upon you, and chosen Islam as your way." This was revealed right during the twilight of the Prophet's life, marking the final culmination of a really long, decades-long struggle. I mean, just imagine the profound, incredible sense of security and peace that must have washed over the early community hearing this. All their struggles were validated. The path of peace was finally complete. Having this context really anchors these massive spiritual truths we're discussing into a real lived human history. And that historical reality brings us to one of the most famous, deeply moving verses in the entire Quran, verse 32. "Whoever saves a life, it will be as if they saved all of humanity." The theological value of this one statement is just immense. But what's really fascinating is the story that comes right before it in the text. The chapter relates the tragic historical account of Adam's two sons, how absolute jealousy led one brother to take the life of the other, literally introducing murder into the human experience. And it's in direct response to that massive tragedy that this universal law was ordained. To save a single human life is to save all of humanity. It elevates the value of human life to the absolute highest spiritual level you could possibly imagine. So, knowing that incredible value of every single life, how should we be interacting with one another on a global scale? That brings us to our final part, Section 5, Competing in Goodness, Shared Purpose, and Universal Unity. Just look at this magnificent call for universal unity from verse 48. So compete with one another in doing good. The text is explicitly acknowledging that yes, humanity is diverse, we all have different paths. But instead of letting those differences become these bitter points of human division, it completely flips the script. It challenges every single one of us to a race. Not a race for wealth or power or status, but a race toward righteousness. It's this beautiful unifying call that basically says, hey, no matter where you come from, let your shared purpose be bringing goodness into this world. Okay, so to wrap up our journey today, how do we actually live this out? Let's distill all this down into some really practical steps for our fast-paced modern routines. First up, use your mornings to just pause. Take a breath and align your hidden intentions with whatever daily commitments you have. Second, when you start to feel overwhelmed, use the physical act of washing, like we do, as a literal mental and spiritual reset button. Third, in your very next conflict, challenge yourself to practice that radical fairness we talked about, because it protects your own peace. And finally, look for just one opportunity today, just one, to actively compete in goodness with somebody else. Which leaves us with this final thought. We started this explainer by talking about sacred promises and how honoring them is the true bedrock of peace. The wisdom of Surah Al-Ma'idah isn't meant to just sit quietly on a page somewhere. It is meant to be lived out, right out there at the table spread of humanity. So I'm going to leave you with this question to reflect on. What is one promise you can honor today to bring more goodness into the world? Thank you so much for taking this meditative journey with me, and I will catch you in the next explainer.